Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons where we take a darker tone with everything we do here. So if you like edgy kind of content, definitely like and subscribe. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description. With that out of the way, we're going to jump into this week's video. We're talking about the Abjuration Wizard. The Abjuration Wizard comes to us from the Player's Handbook, where the War Wizard kind of is anti-caster almost. The Abjuration Wizard is going to be a lot familiar with some of those things. It's more of a defensive kind of a wizard. You're more of a wizard tank as best as possible. It is very, it has a bunch of cool tricks, and it's based around survivability and diminishing damage to you. It's got a lot of cool, interesting facets to it. It almost looks like if you could somehow manage to pair the War Wizard with the Abjuration Wizard, you'd have like this incredible tanky character. But there's going to be a lot of things that are kind of seem very familiar. But this one came out first and the War Wizard came out later. There's a lot of overlap. But I think the Abjuration Wizard is in fact a little bit stronger personally. But that's just my opinion. Definitely let me know in the comments. But it's definitely a more defensive oriented wizard. Right when you pick this arcane school, you get Abjuration Savant. This is something that was in all the players' handbooks, and almost all the wizard subclasses have this, especially when it's organized to a specific school. So when you select a school at second level, the gold and time you must spend to copy Abjuration spells into your spell book is halved. Again, that works with all the different schools. It kind of depends on a bunch of different scenarios. Really work with your DM and make sure this is available, because in games where wizards don't have a lot of spells to copy, you kind of miss out on a lot of what makes the wizard very utility oriented and capable of doing a lot of different things. Also, you get the ability Arcane Ward. You can weave magic around yourself for protection. When you cast an abjuration spell at first level or higher, you can simultaneously use a strand of the spell's magic to create a magical ward on yourself, which lasts until you finish a long rest. The ward has hit points equal to twice your wizard level plus your intelligence modifier. Whenever you take damage, the ward takes the damage instead. If the damage reduces the ward to 0 hit points, you take any remaining damage. While the ward has 0 hit points, it can't absorb damage, but its magic remains. Whenever you cast an abjuration at first level or higher, the ward regains a number of hit points equal to twice the level of the spell. Once you create the ward, you can't create it again until you finish a long rest. So, right off the bat, being an abjuration wizard is going to obviously consist of you spending more time casting abjuration spells. It does give you this ability to kind of regenerate this shield of hit points. Keep in mind, this ward's shields, that hit point that you gain from it, is different from temporary hit points. So, in theory, you could have temporary hit points on and then have a significant amount of hit points to run through before you start actually taking damage. Now, abjuration spells are a little all over the place. Again, they're mostly defensive, but some of the great ones are Absorb Elements, Mage Armor, and Shield. On level 1, right there, those are spells that you can get a lot of use of, especially Shield, because you use it constantly. Absorb Elements is a fantastic spell. Counterspell, Dispel Magic, Protection from Energy, remove Curse. And then as you get up, it kind of gets a little bit wayward because it's kind of all over the place. It's a little difficult to kind of pinpoint what to do with some of these magic spells. They're really kind of defensive oriented, and at a higher level they kind of go into planar levels and specific stone skins and abilities like that. So the bulk of what you're going to gain is out of that first level spells, because you'll use them pretty regularly up until you get to a point where you start dispelling magic and removing curses. That is a big utility. You should always have remove curse, because if you ever fight a mummy, you're in for a bad time. And and there's a lot of curses, and I think curses are fun. I like those kind of like elements in the game where you do something and it has like negative repercussions that don't just go away when you take a nap. That's something you actively have to deal with. And I think that can be a lot of fun, and I think that can be a real moment to develop a character's relationship with other party members or develop a change in a character. At 6th level, you gain Projected Ward. When a creature that you can see within 30 feet of you takes damage, you can use your reaction to cause your arcane ward to absorb that damage. If this damage reduces the ward to 0 hit points, the warded creature takes any remaining damage. This is one of the few spells that you can, or well, few abilities really, that you can do to protect other people in the game. There's not a lot of spells and abilities that give you this. It's pretty rare. It can change certain elements. Say you have somebody casting a spell and you need that concentration to stay up, and they're going to take this damage. Reducing the damage that they take lowers the concentration check that they have to make in order to keep the spell going. Sometimes you just need to make sure that your tank lasts a little longer. Depending on how well positioned you are in combat, can depict when you have this ability available. And I say that because if you happen to be in an area where you can be attacked from multiple angles, Projected Ward is probably not your best thing to use. You might want to keep that for yourself. Depending on circumstances where you're more protected and you have an easy out, if your party members don't, this might be a good way to keep them sustained and keep them alive. Again, you can always cast additional abjuration spells to make this work, but you're gonna need to kind of be the commander in that kind of a situation. Sometimes you need to save certain people, sometimes you need to save yourself, and you need to know the difference. That's more of a tactical understanding of combat, and kind of weighing the weight as to what's really important. If you have a glass cannon and you desperately need to win this fight, and they're the best chance to do so, and they're going to take this hit, which might make them unconscious, save them. That's what it's here for. Save them. At 10th level, you get Improved Abjuration. When you cast an abjuration spell that requires you to make an ability check as part of casting that spell, as in counter spell or dispel magic, you add your proficiency bonus to that ability check. This works really well. This kind of steps on the toes of the War Wizard, where your main focus is counterspelling and dispelling magic. At 10th level, you start to fight more and more casters and people capable of casting high-level spells. Counterspell will be life-changing in those circumstances. Dispel magic can remove a lot of issues that you have to deal with. It works. You want to make those checks, especially when at those crucial moments. Adding your proficiency bonus to that roll is a big advantage. Finally, at 14th level, you gain Spell Resistance. You have advantage on saving throws against spells. Furthermore, you have resistance against the damage of spells. This tacked on with Arcane Ward, which is going to give you about, at this point, say you should have a +5 to your intelligence, if not more. You're probably rocking out at a 33 hit points on top of your hit points. That has to be chewed up before you even take damage, and if you take damage from a spell, that is reduced by half. In the right situations, you have a lot of defensive power because of that. Again, you're not built for fighting soldiers and martial weapons and monsters that do multi-attack. That's not really what this particular wizard is built for. But now you have this availability to survive big hits, to take reduced magical damage. Like, you're tanking casters. Like, that's your deal now. And you're built with an improved counterspell and dispel magic. The one thing that I feel is important to note about Arcane Ward. So, you gain this the ward has its own hit points. It is different from your hit points, meaning the ward's taking damage. So any resistances that you have, the ward does not have. And it's important to keep that in track. Maybe your DM might allocate that if you do have resistance, it is targeting you, and hence that damage would be resisted anyway, and it might have. But I think that might be a little too powerful, especially at early stages. But that's something to keep in mind, depending again on what you're working with, how your DM works, and the kind of game you're in. It might be worth a conversation, but it's important for you to understand that the ward is almost a separate entity. So I would rule it that the ward wouldn't gain any of your resistances. But again, your DM, your games, however you want to roll it, definitely take care of that. Definitely it's at least worth a discussion so you're on the same page, so you don't have to have that issue in the middle of a fight right when a spell is cast, because you don't want to disrupt combat, and getting ahead of it is always better because you can talk about it and not be wrapped up in the emotions. Again, the Abjuration Wizard and the spell list that's kind of built for that is very intricate. You really have to kind of be smart with your choices because it's not always super easily applicable, some of these spells. Alarm is good. Again, that's more so a preparation thing for when you're taking long rests if you're not in a city. Arcane Lock is again one of those things. Magic Circle, protection from energy. Banishment's actually pretty good. But that's a level 4 spell, so you kind of got to be a little higher up there to be able to use it. Planar Binding is great. Global Invulnerability is kind of a fun spell. But the higher up you go, the more difficult it is to kind of put those things together. And it's important to kind of figure that out. You don't really get a lot of offensive spells until like 9th level where you can get Charismatic Wall, but then again you have Wish, so it's kind of hard pressed for that. But that's your biggest issue, is figuring out what kinds of abjuration spells and how to build around them, so that way you do have a way to replenish Arcane Ward. You know, you just have to be able to cast a 1st level spell or higher to gain that ability. Again, the higher level you go is going to be more beneficial, especially towards the later parts of the game, but it doesn't go away. So if you have to prep something early on, prep it early on, so that way you don't have to wait till the 11th hour to replenish this ward. If you happen to have a fight that just finished and you have a spell that you can use to benefit something, close the door, Arcane Lock, whatever it takes. Give yourself that opportunity, because you want to be able to use Projected Ward if you need to, or just to protect yourself to go a little further. Your Counterspell and your Dispelled Magic, those are really beneficial in combat. Nobody really tends to use this often, but you can dispel magic on enemies that have magical things going on, like mage armor or defensive spells going on them. It's very, very important to really kind of consider that and just go for it, because it's any creature, object, or magical effect within range. So just try and knock something off with some of these heavy-duty casters makes a bigger difference. It's something you got to get kind of the right enemy for. But again, you're kind of built to help fight spellcasting. You're built to be tanky. You're built to have this extra buff on you for you to endure these things to kind of whittle down your enemies. Take advantage of that. Don't let Dispel Magic be something that's just used for adventuring. It's great for that, but you can use it offensively in combat as well. And it's a missed opportunity when you don't, because it can really debuff your enemies and give your party members better opportunities to take them down. Alright, that being said, we're going to bring this video to a close. If you made it this far, definitely hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much for making it all the way. It makes a huge difference for the videos when you guys do, and it means a lot to us. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. It really means a lot to us what you do for us. And if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description, as well as the link to our good friends at Critical Failures, where we're part of a live stream game. Usually it happens every Wednesday. about 9:30-ish, give or take. Check us out. We have a lot of fun. I'd love to see you guys there. They're a great group to play with. We have a lot of fun, and we do a lot of interesting things. At least I tend to think so. But check us out every week Wednesday. That's, again, at Critical Failures. And thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.